I retired from the United States Navy last September after almost 40 years in uniform. I'm a submariner, but I spent over a decade of my service on the continent of Europe. In my last assignment in Naples, Italy, I would tell my Italian friends, "Sono nato nella NATO," and that was very true. I was born into NATO, in Rheindal, at NATO Northern Army Group, where my father served as a staff officer after World War II. My dad saw a fair share of combat in Northern Europe during the Second World War, and he loved NATO because he would always tell me, NATO is here to deter major power war. And I couldn't agree more, and that's exactly what has happened since the signing of the Washington Treaty in 1949. We've had 72 going on 73 years of relative peace, thanks to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Now, during my time in Europe, I commanded at all levels, and of the 9 times that I commanded in the United States Navy, 4 of them were with NATO.
NATO is by far the most successful alliance in human history. But to me, NATO is a beautiful synonym. It's the synonym of peace, it's the synonym of freedom, it's the synonym of success and economic prosperity, and everything that the West, the transatlantic community, is synonymous for.
At the most fundamental level, NATO is people standing together to protect themselves so that they can protect future generations. I want to say that again. NATO is people standing together to protect themselves so that they can protect future generations. If you think about the history of Europe, especially World War II, there was massive destruction. The Nazis and the Soviets tried to divide up Europe, conquer different parts of it. There was the Holocaust, there was massive destruction, and many Western European countries fell under German domination. So at the end of World War II, the Allies who helped win the war, the United States, the UK, French resistance, Italy, and so forth, pulled together to form NATO. And their basic line was, this must never happen again. If there's an attack against one of us, we will treat it as an attack against all of us, and we will all respond. And in doing so, this will ensure that no one ever will attack us. And this lasted for 40 years. This was a tremendous success for security in Europe. It created the conditions where the European Union could develop and flourish, provide growing prosperity for Europeans, and it created the conditions that ultimately led to the fall of the Warsaw Pact and the Soviet Union, as people on the other side of the Iron Curtain saw that Western Europe was prosperous, successful, secure, and assuring the kinds of lives for future generations that they wanted for their own people.
Looking at the world today as a millennial, it looks scary. It's hot, it's burning, it's a post-truth world, it's fast, it's uncertain, and it often feels unsafe. And then I think, okay, this is scary. What can we do about it? And I cannot possibly think of an answer in which NATO is not part of that equation. Obviously, NATO cannot address every problem by itself, but it can and should be part of the solution. So why should we, the millennials, the Gen Zers, why should we care about NATO? Well, because even if NATO hasn't ridden the world of all conflict and discord, it has made the world a safer and a more stable place by allowing us to thrive and to prosper in a transatlantic community.
Threats and challenges keep on coming. Think of climate change, think of all the challenges related to emergent and disruptive technologies. And somehow the alliance manages to adapt itself and to overcome them for decades now. I believe that future leaders should be very attentive and keep a close eye on NATO, because NATO holds a huge untapped potential. I believe that NATO can fully become a full-fledged political and military alliance and become a hub coordination platform to discuss various issues and challenges that we face across the pond.
And let's not only care about NATO, let's get involved and shape NATO ourselves. I think the transatlantic community needs to keep in mind a simple thing. At the end of the day, there's so much more that unites us than what divides us. And this is exactly what motivates me to spend a lot of my time thinking about how the cooperation between the European Union and NATO can be made to work better, about ways in which we can reinvigorate and modernize the transatlantic relationship.
NATO is a community of values. It is not always a community that has respected these values. Today, we have differences of opinion among NATO allies as to the state of democracy in Poland or Hungary or Turkey. So fundamentally, it is about that collective self-defense and protection. It's also about shared values. And the more we stick together and the more we build that community, the more we can talk among ourselves about how to best realize those values that are at the hearts of our societies. Even if our governments sometimes step one way or another, I think our societies are committed to these values, and that's also part of the essence of NATO.
To any of the adversaries who would challenge us, that we are indeed stronger together. Now that I've taken off the uniform and become a distinguished fellow at the Center for European Policy Analysis, I'm not at the heart of the chain of command of the NATO alliance anymore. I've turned over that responsibility to the youth of NATO and those young officers and soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who sailed with me during Exercise Trident Juncture. I rely on you to carry the mantle of leadership forward so that the alliance remains strong for another 72 years.